SigTalks, Episode 028, BJ's Greenbooks with Dr. James Sigafoose, Number 2. Are you looking to advertise a chiropractic product or service or your next seminar? If you are, and you want your product to go directly in front of some of the best that chiropractic has to offer, then SigTalks, the chiropractic philosophy, might just be what you're looking for. SigTalks is downloaded on average over 165 times daily, and in over 60 countries around the world, and on every continent except Antarctica. Since its launch in March of this year, we have had over 31,000 downloads in all. If you are interested in advertising on our show, you can contact us at chirosig@sigafoose.com. That's CHIROSIG at sigafoose.com. Or you can call us at 443-619-8770. Don't miss out, limited space available at extremely simple and low rates. Non-competition clauses available on a first-come, first-served basis.
Hello, and welcome to SigTalks with your host, Dr. Carrie Sigafoose, your home for the chiropractic philosophy, where we discuss the teachings of Dr. James Sigafoose, from his writings to his talks and his many audio presentations.
In this episode, Dr. James Sigafoose reads from The Great Divide. This is the 6th recording in an 8-recording set, which also includes readings from Palmer's Law of Life, The Bigness from The Fellow Within, and The Great Divide. There's also a bonus recording at the end where Dr. Sigafoose teaches a group of patients on the importance of chiropractic for themselves and for children. The clip that I chose is of Dr. Sigafoose reading about BJ's writings about proving that the brain, spinal cord, and the nerves, as they exit the foramina, will fill the entire space. With that, I will let Dr. Sigafoose and BJ take it from here.
A study of the evolution of research. In 1935, seeing and feeling confusion all about us, doubts everywhere, we decided to throw everything in the research hopper, including the multitudinous, varied, complex theories of professions advocated by a man of our profession, for our profession. Techniques galore, wild and fantastic as many of them were, no explanations or reason. We included all these in our own to test and hold fast to those which worked and discard those which were peddled for monetary reasons by glib salesmen. To that end, we built a $1 million research clinic. We asked for and received problem cases. Cases on which medical profession failed came to you. Those on whom you failed came to us. We equipped it with many devices, many questions we asked. We devised, invented, and patented much. We built a staff of 27 experts, each to his own. 35 years of endless labor has been devoted to testing any, many, and all principles and practices, our own as well as others, all to one ultimate end: did it or did it not make possible a normal change from a decreased abnormal disease flow of mental impulse of nerve force flow to an increased normal healthy flow of mental impulse or nerve force flow. In many instances, we found techniques were dangerous because it used decreased flows. Some were innocuous, neither helped nor hindered, and some were of practical value. How do we test each technique? By measuring, calibrating, and evaluating net results, graphing 8 simultaneous channels of flow, both before and after the use of such technique or method. In doing so, our integrity or accuracy of our work was challenged, especially if the net result disagreed with his concept. If our result agreed with his, we were angels. If the reverse were true, we were selfish, egotistical, and conceited. The tempograph proved of tremendous value. This instrument alone cost $100,000. We could recite our research on many of these techniques, but time does not permit. Sufficient to say, we proved what worked and what didn't. Often after proving some technique as delivered by himself on cases we supplied, we would show proof one way or the other. If the negative, he still denied our conclusion. At all times and in all cases, we held fast to that which restored health and denied those which failed. For that and these reasons, we have confidence when we make statements based on conviction. For same reason, this makes us an authority on the provable. Today, we use only those methods in the BJP Chiropractic Clinic. Cases we accepted in the BJP Chiropractic Clinic for research purposes were all kinds, colors, races, conditions, ages, international scope, even to dislocation and fracture. And for these reasons, we pronounce that all primary subluxation occurred in the occipito-atlantoaxial area. And this was the area where vertebral subluxation could become etiologically malpositioned to the extent of occluding a foramen, producing pressure, interfering with and reducing normal flow quantity, flow to abnormal reduced flow, acting as the cause of all disease. Later, we were to modify this in part based on more recent and exhaustive study of our osteolabs. Also, for this further reason, the superior specific vertebral subluxation would at times and places produce a pathology of osseous structures in the spinal column inferior to the area mentioned. Such pathologies produced lordoses, scolioses, kyphoses, rotary curvature, sometimes to an extent that such did in actuality occlude an opening, producing a secondary adaptive pressure interfering secondarily with a secondary reduction in flow, inducing a secondary inferior reduction in flow in addition to the superior reduction in flow which produced the inferior pathology. To make a distinction between primary cause and secondary effect, we term superior specific of vertebral subluxation and inferior pathology of vertebral misalignment. And what we did was a correction, not an adjustment. We always adjusted primary superior specific, then we post-checked, waiting for a reasonable time to see if superior specific adjustment checked out other interferences inferior readings. If it did, we did nothing more. If it did not check out inferior readings and the superior reading and check out and see what was a question of a judgment to wait and see whether superior adjustment corrected inferior pathology, thus releasing inferior interference. If given time, such was checked out. Nothing more was needed being done at inferior location. In our profession, extreme caution must be exercised to make a distinction between curvatures and adaptive curves of the spinal column. Curvatures are based on caries, necrosis, tuberculosis, and etc. Adaptive curves are based on a permanent relaxation of a muscle on one lateral side of the spinal column, permitting opposite or normal side to have an unnatural pulling the column out of its duty of sustaining a gravity balance. Or, such can be based on the opposite condition of a permanent contraction called contractures of muscles on one lateral side of the column, pulling the column out of relaxation or out of balance. Permanent relaxation is named prolapsus. Permanent contraction is named contracture. In either of these lateral conditions, there need not be any pathology of bone structure. This procedure, carefully followed, prevents over-adjusting, which often does more harm and damage than it does good. Investigation to denial of chiropractic. During these periods of research, when much was misunderstood by many, to offset some of this, various people offered much which was contradictory, but not substantial. One of these was issued in the Lincoln College Bulletin, coming forth with the pronouncement that the IVF were so large that the nerves existing between them with their meninges and intermeningeal fluids were so small and flexible so it didn't fill the space, and that it was impossible to have any pressure upon nerves at these locations and thus produce disease at the periphery. If this statement was true, then all that was distinctly chiropractic was set out as a separate profession with an ideology and philosophy, science, and art of its own, which was entirely new in the fields of getting sick people well, then there could not be individuality to the chiropractic principle and or practice. And was this statement true, or was it fundamentally unsound? The fact that what we did got sick people well on that premise, while good enough for us, didn't settle the question in scientific research as proof. Medical man questioned our premise severely. That question had to be settled, or all was lost. Superficial study of any book on anatomy, with the exception of one, Spotholtz, are entirely and exclusively based on work done in dissection, long after bodies have wasted from shrinkage. How was this vital question to be settled? Well, here's how we approached this detail. We went to a local undertaker and asked permission to dissect or x-ray unclaimed bodies. This he refused because he was compelled to keep bodies for 30 days. Next, we went to the governor, secured from him a letter to the professor of pathology and anatomy of the state of the university, granting us the privilege of x-raying all their dissected bodies. We were there asked what we hoped to prove, and we stated our problem. And he promptly told us this method would not prove or disprove our theory because brain nerves, being the softest substance in the body, shrunk everywhere from 40% to 50% within 24 hours after death. Shrinkage of bone was infinitesimal even after months or years. He further stated they dissected their bodies in rotation, first in, first out, or a period of approximately 18 months between the time they received the body before it would be dissected. During this period, brain and nerves under formaldehyde would shrink brain, spinal cord, nerves between 85 to 95%. We then went to New York hoping to find pickled dissection specimens for sale. We couldn't purchase any. We were able to secure such specimens, but we were told there was only one place in the world where such a theory could be tested and proved or disproved, and that's the Spotholz labs in Dresden, Germany. Inasmuch as all illustrations and descriptions and anatomies were based on dissection, they could not be the same as from the living body. Therefore, erroneous conclusions were unjustly decided as to size of nerves in the foramina. There was nothing to do but go to Dresden, which we did. It's a well-known fact that the Spotholz anatomy was the finest and most accurate work on that subject. All illustrations in his book were taken directly from dissections, even the long-dead bodies. It's a known fact that in the field of anatomical research, Spotholz labs were the greatest, finest, and most elaborate. It was also well known that the German mind was the most intricate and exacting for fact-finding in the world. We presented our theoretical problem to Drs. Spotholz, Gunther, and Miller. They stated this was a new theory in anatomy, and that if anybody knew the answer, they'd have it. They stated they had never had that question presented to them, and as a matter of science, they'd like to prove or disprove it. They too were up against the same problem of embalmed bodies with shrinkage, which they verified, which percentages equal those of the State University of Iowa. However, Dr. Spotholz did state there was only one way this problem could be solved and settled, and that was to quick deep freeze bodies immediately at death before any shrinkage could occur, then saw out sections to see whether the brain, nerve, spinal cord filled cavities, canals, foramina, etc. They stated there was only one way this could be done, and that's to get a permit from the German government to quick freeze bodies in hospitals at the moment of death before any shrinkage could occur. So special permission was secured, and this process was followed in the hospitals on unclaimed bodies. We remained in Dresden 6 weeks and helped with these dissections. And as we look back, we're quite certain in a few instances were quick, deep frozen just a few breaths from immediate death. The result of all this research in living bodies was that the brain filled the cranial vault, the spinal cord filled the spinal canal, desiccated nerves filled intervertebral foramen in their existing passing outward. And as a result of this research, Dr. Spotholz issued a report on their findings. From that day to this, due to the prominence of men conducting same, this problem was settled and has never been questioned by medical men or by men in our profession. It's regrettable that Dr. Spotholz, Gunther, and Miller were liquidated by Hitler and their labs completely destroyed. Being Jewish was the reason. We weren't permitted to bring home any dissections. We did, however, take photographs of many, sufficient to have documentary and documented proof of the problem and its solution. It took 6 weeks' time there and cost $5,000 to settle once and for all this fundamental and basic question upon which the chiropractic principle and practice rested. I want to put something in here on my own. I want you to look at these figures of 100,000, 5,000. These were figures back in 1935 and 1936. I want you to understand that research, as we wish it to be done now, has been done. I want you to understand that most of the things that we're seeking to have medical people prove to us has been proved to us by a chiropractor by the name of B.J. Palmer, of whom we deny, of whom we ignore all of his work and all of his monies and all of his times spent to prove the existence of that which you and I have at our hands and deny so curtly. And I think we need to evaluate ourselves and look into our own, quit looking outside.
And we're back. You know, it's extremely difficult to discuss this clip. I mean, how do you discuss or dissect BJ's writings or Dr. Sigafoose's delivery of said writings? I do like how BJ focuses on the C1, C2 region in his research. I want, for the sake of this episode, to focus on what the research is about. that being the Lincoln College paper that stated there is no way that a nerve could be impinged due to the fact that the foramina were so large and that the nerve so small and had plenty of space for movement. This one paper, if listened to, would have thrown the whole premise of chiropractic into the toilet. At this point, BJ chose the only path that he could, and that was to go to the #1 research clinic in the world at that time in Dresden, Germany. There, with the research on flash frozen cadavers and not chemically preserved ones, BJ and the research team of Dr. Gunther Spotholz proved once and for all that the nerve did in fact fill the entire intervertebral foramen. I'm actually going to keep my comments short on this episode, seeing that my father's words and his obvious emotional speech at the end pretty much sums up this entire clip. So, to reiterate what Dr. Sigafoose said, the research has been done. We need to reevaluate ourselves and look into our own and quit looking outside. With that, I will say thank you for tuning in, and if anyone would ever like to come on SigTalks to discuss any of my father's or BJ's teachings, I would be happy to have you on the show. Just contact me at chirosig@sigafoose.com, and we will set up a Skype call to air the show. If you're interested in getting BJ's Greenbooks with Sigafoose, just head on over to sigafoose.com and visit our online store. There you will find all of my father's works. Until next time, keep happy and healthy.
Thank you for joining us today. If you're interested in more of Dr. Sigafoose's material, head on over for your daily dose of chiropractic philosophy to www.sigafoose.com and register for our free newsletter and to find today's audio clip of Dr. Sigafoose in its entirety. Remember to give, love, do, and serve.